What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be joined by Brad Rowland from Locked On Hawks to react to and break down the report that the Atlanta Hawks are apparently managing simmering issues between star guard Trae Young and head coach Nate McMillan. How strained are we to believe the relationship is between Trae and McMillan at this point? What does this say about Trae as a leader, and how secure is McMillan's job right now? But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis this season. Get the latest odds and trends for every single professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer, even esports. They've got you covered for everything over at BetOnline.net. Right now, you can head over to BetOnline to take a look at who the odds-on favorite is to go number one overall in this year's 2023 NBA draft. Spoiler alert, it's Victor Wembanyama at minus 1,000. But here's the funny thing. Next on the list is actually anybody other than Scoot Henderson has a plus 825 chance to go number one overall. And then Scoot Henderson is plus 1,000 to go number one overall. So for all those odds and more, be sure to visit betonline.net to learn more about the trends in action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Joining us now is Brad Rowland, the host of Locked On Hawks. You can follow on Twitter at BT Rowland. Now, Brad, the Hawks are fourth place in the Eastern Conference, and you know, they've had a decent start to their season, but apparently winning doesn't cure everything, seeing as how there are apparently, as reported by The Athletic's Shams Charania and Sam Amick, simmering issues between Trae Young and head coach Nate McMillan. Now, before we dive into the specifics of this report, Brad, simmering issues does not sound good whatsoever.
It does not. I actually led my show with that exact two-word quote. It's not the greatest thing that you'll ever hear. There were several things in that report that do not make you excited to be a Hawks fan, I'm sure, at this very moment in time.
Yeah, so, I mean, the gist of it is Trae Young, McMillan had this, you know, back and forth exchange at Friday's shoot-around this past weekend, where Trae Young ultimately decided not to attend the home game win against the Denver Nuggets at State Farm Arena. Essentially, it looks like it kind of boiled down to an ultimatum, if you will, from Nate McMillan, where it was either show up to the game, as reported by Shams Charania, just, you know, show up to the game, come off the bench, or don't show up to the game, was what Nate McMillan basically told Trae Young per sources, and Trae Young decided not to show up. And this seems to me, Brad, that there's just, you know, maybe underlying issues, you know, between Trae Young and Nate McMillan. And I just want to get your, you know, understanding of how strained are we to believe this relationship is between Trae and Nate McMillan at this point?
Yeah, like you said, it's a little bit early to like confirm everything. It's all came really fast today, and Friday was weird for sure. I think actually I'm pretty sure I was the person that was first to report that he wasn't in the building on Friday night, which is a little bit strange. People kind of noticed he was on the bench, and it was like, that's weird. So I went and tried to find. It's like, no, he's not in the building at all. Like, that's a little bit strange. And the whole way it was TikToked by Shams and Sam Amick it's definitely a situation where, if that's all true, and we can probably assume that it is, given who the reporters are, it does not make the situation look great. And there were rumblings, you know, in years past, even last year, that Nate and Trae weren't the tightest. They had this whole story arc in the offseason about how Nate went to Oklahoma to meet with Trae, and they had a couple of days together, sort of a summit of the minds, and they were all saying the right things. But I can see how they may not be the most, you know, tightest of friends necessarily. You know, Trae, especially right now with the offense, you talked about how the team is playing, and they are playing well, but the offense has not been clicking so far. And that's Trae Young's side of the ball. That's what the Hawks are known for. And maybe that's part of it too. And it seemed like there was a kind of a weird standoff with the reporting. Like, both sides were kind of being stubborn, and to have Trae come off the bench would be a very, very strange thing to happen. So all of it is kind of just odd. And I'm not terribly panicked at this point if I'm a Hawks fan, but it's definitely to the point of like, my eyebrows are raised.
What is, if anything, does this say about Trae Young kind of as a leader for this Hawks team, right? Somebody that you expect to, I don't know, I don't want to say maybe respond differently in circumstances like this, because the ultimatum from McMillan, you know, at least per the reporting, it seemed like Trae just wanted to kind of focus on his health, kind of rehabilitating, and, you know, not necessarily having to worry about playing in this game. And McMillan gave him an option that was, you know, either play or, you know, come off the bench, or just don't show up, which again is very weird, all things considered.
Yeah, I think honestly, the reporting makes neither side look great. It makes Nate look like he's kind of overreacting, and it looks like, you know, and also on Trae's side, there was stuff in the reporting that was questioning Trae's leadership. And That is not, honestly, I don't think of Trae as this like huge vocal leader. But as you well know, the best player on a team, face of the franchise, there's always a leadership element to that, whether that person is geared for it or not. I don't think Trae is a natural vocal leader. I think he probably would maybe admit that even, but you have to know, as the face of the franchise, there is always a part of the team that is going to look at you and a part of the team that you have to lead just by nature of your presence. And this is not a great look all around. He was tweeting during the game. He was being positive, because he wasn't at the game, he was able to have his phone and was saying some tweets during the game. So it wasn't like he just bailed on them. It was uplifting stuff about DeJounte Murray and Bogdanovich coming back and all that stuff. But, you want your guy there. You want your guy on the bench up. And even if it's like kind of performative in nature, just to see the guy on the bench and with his teammates, that's a small thing that, even fans can see. Fans noticed that he wasn't on the sideline before even some of the media did. It was like, wait, where's Trae? Why is Trae not on the sideline? And I'm like, that's a great question, fan on Twitter. I mean, it's a very odd thing, but when fans notice you're not there, that's the number one maybe thing that's like, all right, this is a little bit strange.
Brad, how secure, given this situation and maybe just, the fact that this is maybe kind of highlighting, some deeper seated issues here with the Hawks, how secure do you think Nate McMillan's job is right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting because Shams made it a point in that piece to say that Nate was safe. And he also kind of tied it to them being 13-10 and being fourth in the East right now. I think if the Hawks were to have a losing spell, you could see Nate be in some trouble. And I'm not saying that's definitely the case, but they went into a trip to Orlando earlier this week where they lost 3 games in a row. And it was kind of like, this is the kind of situation where if it spirals on them and they lose 6 in a row, the head coach is usually the guy that goes first, especially that's before this reporting even came out. Now, if the Hawks have a downturn at any point, we all know how this ends. Maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year, whatever. If they have to choose between Trae Young and Nate McMillan, we know which way they're going to choose. It's going to be Trae Young they choose. And I shouldn't say I'm sure. It may not get to that point, and it may not be an ultimatum from Trae or Nate, but usually that's how this goes. And the head coach is on less firm ground. That probably applies here, especially after last year where the front office and ownership were disappointed with how things went. And if they don't win at the high level this year, the head coach certainly could be on the chopping block. But like you said, at the very top of this conversation, they're 13-10 and fourth in the East. If they're fourth in the East, he's not getting fired. I can't imagine that.
How will the Hawks resolve this situation, this ongoing situation, it looks like, between Trae Young and head coach Nate McMillan? Will the winning, if the Hawks continue to be able to win, if they continue to be one of the top seeded teams in the Eastern Conference, will that be enough to kind of, assuage any, potential, issues in their relationship and keep things going smoothly in Atlanta? Of course, you're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Hawks. Brad, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks for having me.